What you're about to experience are my opinions and truths. I'm suggesting they're possibilities for you to consider, in which you can then come up with your own logical conclusions. Good day or evening to everyone out there in the decoding world. My name is Logan, and this is Decode Your Reality. And today we're going to be breaking down and decoding the mighty Led Zeppelin, one of the greatest bands of all time, notably in so many different categories. The great band Led Zeppelin, and this decode, folks, is kind of tying into Pink Floyd and all the music that they've expressed throughout the years. You know, these massive bands and I'm gonna show again, decoding these guys, that they were being used. Their avatars, their personalities. Why did these guys get together specifically, in the time frames that they got together and the years that they were active? Notice that they were active in 1968. And this is, to me, the tetragrammaton, which runs the box, is the box, the cube that we live in. It's tied to this 68. And if you've been following this great research, this element right here called erbium is part of the code. And it tells us the story. So Zeppelin came out in 1968, and I want you to notice that erbium has several atomic weights or masses measured in a laboratory. Here's one of them, folks, 166. And I want you to notice the abundance of that is 22%. 166, which is really interesting. Keep your eyes on this English right here. It's linked to this right here called the tetragrammaton. 166, tied to that atomic mass of erbium, tied to when Led Zeppelin first became active in the world of music. These four guys right here. Folks, there's so many layers to this. It was absolutely bananas for me doing this present. I've been working on this one for a while, put it on the shelf, and here we are again. But folks, I'm going to suggest you put on a pair of headphones, block out the outside world. This presentation is going to be give or take an hour, and it's going to involve a lot of information. And if you've been paying attention to this great work, you're going to clearly see, again, that these guys, as I said, were being used to play music. And they're singing, not to just us and entertaining us, but they're serenading us as human beings, but they're literally singing to something outside of our reality. That's what I believe, because this is the game of life, and that's what we're all playing. So here we go, folks. Here are the topics of conversation during this presentation. In the zero position, which is what I'm doing now, always want to include the zero. It's the intro. Number one, we're going to break down the band members. And I wait till you see all this stuff. This is why I say there's no way man could ever code this. Number two, we're going to break down probably the most well-known song in the entire universe. Everybody knows this. This is the trademark song of the band, Stairway to Heaven. Number three, in that song, Stairway to Heaven, it's saying that the glitters is gold. What does that mean? We're going to get into that, folks. It's all about the gold currency, if you haven't figured that out by now. Number four, where they recorded the Led Zeppelin album for the Olympic Studios. Probably more than that, but that's just what I know, what I researched. Number 5, of course, the label they created in 1974. Of course, it has to be number 74. That's the Swan Song. And of course, in the 6th position, always love to hear what you saw during this presentation. And the band had one of these on their albums, The Old Man on the Mountain, which of course is the Hermit card in the tarot. So if you go to the tarot and you go to the 9th card, there it is. And I believe that's exactly, because Jimmy Page, there's no secret he was involved and he was fascinated by the occult, and he's tied to Aleister Crowley and all this stuff. So clearly you can see the resemblance of that Hermit. And the Hermit card, of course, is the container of all the other numbers 1 through 8. So that's why it's the wise, almighty, old man on the mountain, the sage. All the greats are tied to this tarot card, by the way. Gandhi, Buddha, Jesus, Muhammad, all those ideas and characters, real or not, they're all tied to that Hermit card. And of course, Zeppelin had that tied to their band. So folks, here we go. There are the topics, and we're going to jump around. So let's get into the band. Let's get into the band Led Zeppelin. And, where did they get their name from? Well, I researched it, and according to some of the opinions out there, it was from Keith Moon of The Who mentioned lead balloon. We're going to go down like a lead balloon, talking about their music. And, of course, Jimmy Page was part of that, and he kept that. And, of course, that's where he got Led Zeppelin. But, if you go research Zeppelin itself, you're going to find yourself linked to this guy right here, Ferdinand von Zeppelin. And, his birthday, the 8th of July. I mean, look at the sinks in this guy. Born on the 8th, died on the 8th. There's the 88. There's the 88. The 8th of July card is the 7 of diamonds, which is the 33rd card in the deck. Kind of fascinating with that. But that's, that's what it's tied to. The Zeppelin, the aircraft that was used in some of the wartime during the 40s. But what's interesting is this word Zeppelin. And, they were called Led Zeppelin, but they took out the A. And I'm going to show this because it's tied to the Stairway to Heaven. But what you want to focus on here is Zeppelin is 42. We're going to break down the full band name, but Zeppelin is a 42, and it's tied to this element right here called molybdenum. It's a tongue twister. Molybdenum. It's the mirror of the 79, which is 97, which is tied to gold. 42, if you know the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Universe, the secrets and keys to the universe, 42. Some people link that to the planet Jupiter. But, obviously you can see lead and lead. And I say that because you see the molybdenum element when you go to the Royal Society of Chemistry and you pull up the 42nd element, which is right here, and you go to the uses and properties, you go to the origins of the name. It's right there. The name is derived from the Greek molybdos, and it means lead. It means lead. Led Zeppelin. And it's so fascinating how this ties in just like this. Just like this, folks. The tie-ins there. So, again, to these guys looking at the elements of the periodic table, is Jimmy Page into the periodic table? He was a big influencer in the band's direction, the songwriting, all that stuff, the influence he had from the occult. Was he influenced by the elements of the periodic table? And, again, folks, then you got to go to this guy right here who created the Zeppelin, and you got to bring him to it. I could bring this guy into it. That's what I'm saying. There's so many layers to all of this. There's no way that man could ever code this stuff to see and get these outcomes that we're getting. There's too many people involved. These Led Zeppelin, these guys, they didn't know Count Ferdinand von Zeppelin. They weren't even around when this guy came out and was a general. But yet, here he is, that he's the creator of the Zeppelin, and these guys chose that as part of their name of the band, and it's tied to lead. The element lead, and then molybdenum, which means lead, which is absolutely fascinating, folks. So let's break down the Led Zeppelin band name in its totality and do what's called alchemology. Alchemology, if you're new to this, it's taking numerology, which is right here, breaking down Led Zeppelin, and you'll notice that each letter has a number associated with it. And then the next layer is taking the elements of the periodic table and tying those and matching them up to the numbers. So L is the number 3, that's the element lithium. E is the number 5, and that's the 5th element called boron, and so on. So we get lead, and then we get Zeppelin. Led Zeppelin, and when you add up all these elements derived from the numerology of Led Zeppelin, going over to the trusty calculator, you're going to get the number 103.072. 103 on the masculine side of the decimal. That 103 has been showing over and over and over. Folks, if you type in A through Z, if you do the full alphabet right here, I'm not going to do it, but if you do the entire alphabet, well, why not? Let's do it. If you do the entire alphabet while I'm talking to you, this requires pretty good skill right here. You're going to get 103. So the Word was God, the God was the Word. If you fancy theology and bringing it into this and syncretizing this information, there it is. A through Z is 103, which is how we speak our magic spells, using all these letters through the spoken word. And this band, Led Zeppelin, all their music and lyrics and everything is the 103. And the 103 is a massive number in the world of math and prime numbers and Fibonacci. 103 is the 27th prime number. 27 is tied to this word right here called currency. Currency. And if you don't like currency, we can go here and type in current and we're going to get the same outcome. Because folks, it's all about our gold currency. What kind of currency, energetic currency do you put out into the world? And where does that energy go? What does it feed? Because when you get into the layers of vibrational frequency, quantum physics, trigonometry, pi, and you bring all these layers, it all comes down to one thing, folks. It's vibrational frequency and currency. And as I continue to say, we are all being mined for our energetic gold. And that's where I feel the story of the Anunnaki come into play. How that's tied into all of this. And it really comes down to this element right here called cobalt. And cobalt is the only element with the abbreviations of C and O. I had a decode on chaos and order. If you haven't seen that, please check it out. But that is the two letters that start off those two big names or titles or nouns, chaos and order. And that's inside the currency, inside the game of life, inside the vibrational frequency that all of us create and are continually creating through music, movies, expressions of spells and casting spells, through speaking spells, and just I'm talking to you right now and I'm casting spells. That's how magic works. Well, that's music serenades you and it puts you under a hypnotic trance sometimes through the music. And this is clearly an indication that these guys were being used through their music. And of course, they were supposed to come together because it was written in the code and the software before these guys were ever born. The software of this game of life was coded long before each and every one of us got here. And then when we pop out from a mother's womb and we come out into this world, we energetically are connected to the people we ended up meeting. And there are no such thing as accidents or mistakes. Everything that we do is supposed to happen. And if we end up getting off course, we get pushed back on course. It's all about the currency, folks. And these guys were being used for their currency. That's why this is showing up like this and why they are so influential in the world of music. So it comes down and breaks down to this element cobalt, which of course, let me digress and show you. See, this 27 right here, which is tied to currency, is tied to this card in the medicine deck, where here we go. These are the 52 cards of the medicine deck, and these use animals, insects, and reptiles to express itself through the numbering system. But there is the 27th card in the deck called the dragonfly card. Now, why would the dragonfly be tied to this element right here of chaos and order and currency? Because you see, folks, what does the theology talk about? It talks about the great dragon was hurled down. And the dragon is the sin wave. It's the sine wave. It's the frequencies that we put out through our emotions, through our music, and our serenading of people. And that's the trances we get put into. And that's why music is so influential, and television and movies and all that kind of stuff. And this is what runs it. It's the frequency. Cobalt means goblin. If you go and look at the periodic table and you go to this 27th element and you look at that, you're going to notice that they've kind of quietly put the picture in there, but there is the goblin, there's the pine cone, the pineal gland, and there's two dragons on each side. Chaos and order, and it's the dragon sine wave. That's what this is resembling. And when you go and you research the origins of the name, it comes from the German word kobold with a K, and it means goblin. That's what it means. So you can put two and two together, folks. Let's keep going. I have a lot more information, but clearly these guys were all about the gold currency and what kind of gold they can give off and collect. And what's really fascinating, folks, is you see the currency is owned by what's called the puppet master. Now, there are several ways that you can observe, like, what's running our reality? What's controlling our reality? You say, Logan, you say man's being used. Yeah, who's running man? Well, folks, we all have handlers. Like, you know, when you walk your dog, you're handling your dog. Who handles you? Is it plausible to think that you're being handled by energies outside of your reality that you just can't see, and you're being influenced by all these things that are happening in your life? Could that be a possibility? And you see, Puppet Master is the number 58. It's the number 58, and why I'm showing the Puppet Master is because you see cobalt has an atomic weight. It's most abundant, and it has several atomic weights measured in a laboratory, but its most abundant is 58. So it's tied to this word right here called Puppet Master, and this is how we can use all these layers to bridge and come together and form a puzzle and put the puzzle together. These are all puzzle pieces. So 58 is Puppet Master, tied to the word currency, tied to Led Zeppelin, and then 58 Puppet Masters tied to this element right here called cerium. Now, what does cerium have to tell us? Well, notice the atomic weight it has, 141. What is pi? 3.141. That's pi. So clearly you can see the Puppet Master, it owns the first three numbers in pi that we're all creating pi. I've shown this over and over, the sine and cosine waves. But when you go to cerium, what is the story it tells? Well, it's the god of agriculture. It's from the asteroid Ceres, which was named after the Roman goddess of agriculture. So if you go and research that and go further, you're going to find more clues. And it's telling us the story of how this reality called the game of life is working. And clearly music and Led Zeppelin are tied to that. So let's break down the four guys that made up the band, the great band Led Zeppelin. You have John Bonham, you have Robert Plant, you have Jimmy Page, and you have John Paul Jones. The four band members that made up the great band Led Zeppelin. And here are their birthdays and the cards of illumination that are tied to their birthdays. And you should know what your card is by now, folks. But here are the four cards of these four band members, and I showed this in Pink Floyd and how there's no way man could ever. These guys would have to sit down and orchestrate their own lives. Their parents would have to together and say, we're gonna hump on this day, and we're gonna have a baby on this. Folks, that's not possible. Okay, it's not possible to orchestrate the births of certain people and band members for them to get together and all that. It's not possible. This would not be possible for men to consciously construct this, because all these guys were born on different days. Their parents were humping on different days to make their babies on different days being born. So it wouldn't be possible. This alone right here should throw out the window of you thinking man's running this reality. So nonetheless, here are the birthdays. Bonham was born on May 31st, Robert Plant on August 20th, Jimmy Page on January 9th, and John Paul Jones on January 3rd. So it's the ace clubs, the six clubs, the five spades, and the jack spades. That's what's linked to their birthdays. And, here's the chart for that. I'm not going to go through all of them, but if you want these charts, just send me an email, decodeyourreality@gmail.com, and I'll send you the chart so you can start looking up the stuff for yourself. But all their birthdays are in here. And when you take the numbers, because these are all the numbers of the cards, ace clubs is the 14th card, six clubs is the 19th card, five spades is the 44th card, jack spades is the 50th card. And again, going to that, here are the numbers of the cards. Here's jack spades is the 50th card, six clubs is the 19th card, and so on. And this is what's tied to these guys' births. So when you go over to the trusty calculator and you add up those cards, folks, 44 plus 14 plus 50 plus 19, you're going to get a total of the number 127. What do you see there, folks? Immediately, there's that number 27 again, tied to this word called currency. It just has the one in front of it, which means it's just a hierarchy of the number 27. But nonetheless, it's still feeding that number 27. It's owned by the number 27. So then you get into, the prime numbers of this, and you start to look and realize that it's telling us more of a deeper story of these guys' lives. And again, I'm basing it strictly off their cards and the numbering of the cards based off their birth. So we get the 127. Look at what the prime number is tied to this number. Here's the number 709, and the 127 is that prime number. Folks, how about that? The 127 found from these guys' birth cards, not even their birthdays, wait till I show you that, is the number 709. What is 709 tied to? This element right here. You just got to drop the zero. It's right there, folks. This is how numbers express themselves. Just because the zero's there doesn't mean it's not tied to the 79. It's gold. These guys found through their cards, through their birth cards, is tied to gold. And it's gold currency. These guys were gold currency, and the puppet master owned their energy. Who's the puppet master? Who is the puppet master, folks? So how about that? 709 is the 127th prime number tied to the element gold. And this is what I feel runs the box. It's the name of the box. It's what the Greeks called the demiurge. The Greeks named the Yod-Heh-Vah-Heh from the God of the Bible, which, remember, folks, if you study your history, that deity came into existence around the Bronze and Iron Age. And we have history that goes way beyond that. Way before that, if you study your ancient Egypt, there was no such thing as this energy and this deity. Not even close. Something different. So are we seeing a repackage of what people call God? Because this is the God of the Bible right here, by the way, the Tetragrammaton, which clearly seems to be running the box, which is why the Jewish faith, they have a black box on their forehead, which is why the Mecca and Saudi Arabia, they have a black box sitting in the middle of a huge courtyard that they all pray and worship to. What do you think that's in tribute to? It's in tribute to the Tetragrammaton. They can call it something else. Some people call it Allah. It doesn't really matter what you want to call it. It goes by many names. But nonetheless, it's the same energy taking its course through our reality called the game of life. And I believe it's running, or at least it may have taken over people's lives. I don't really know, folks. I don't have a clear-cut answer on what I'm telling you right now. But clearly, this box is revered in so many different religions. And this is tied to the planet Saturn. Saturn is Kronos. Kronos in the Greek mythology is part of the Titans, which got casted down to earth from the Olympians. These guys recorded their album in Olympic Studios. We're going to get into that. But clearly, folks, you can see, there it is. This is when they got started, 1968. These guys first came out onto the scene. There it is. Subtly, but you can't leave it out. And that's 166 tied to tetragrammaton. And it's tied, of course, to this element right here, gallium. And gallium has 31 protons, and we know pi is 3.14, but it's 3.1. And there is that 68. You see, it's 68, it's 68. It came out in 1968. It's 166. It's 166. These guys were singing, and they are in the box. They're owned by the box. Their lives are not their own, folks. So when you break down their birthdays, let's break down their birthdays. Here they are, just the days. Again, Bonham, born on the 31st, Robert Plant on the 20th, Jimmy Page on the 9th, and Jones on the 3rd. There it is. So we go over to the trusty calculator. 31 plus 20 plus 9 plus 3 equals the number 63. That's tied to europium, if you want to go that route, but it's tied to this element called copper. Copper is tied to the Temple of Jerusalem because the Boaz and Yachin pillars were made of copper. And of course, it's tied to one big element in our matrix reality or deity. It's called, keep your eyes on the ciphers here, it's called Yaldabaoth, right there. Yaldabaoth. He owns many numbers, or it owns many numbers, but it's Yaldabaoth. And Yaldabaoth, quite clearly, folks, could be the main character in our world that we see living out through its expressions. It may own everything. And the Yod-Heh-Vah-Heh may be working for the Yaldabaoth character, or they're just one and the same character. Haven't been able to pinpoint and really kind of grasp what really is the truth on that. But to me, they're one and the same, or at least one works for the other. But nonetheless, the octopus is everywhere. And there it is. And, remember, folks, copper is linked to blue because it makes blood blue and octopuses. Just remember that. Blue blood is made blue by copper. Horseshoe crabs and octopus, they have blue blood because they have copper in there instead of iron. Us humans, we have iron in our blood, red. And that's why we have our blood is red. But copper is linked to blue, the blue bloods and octopus and horseshoe crabs. And it's tied to the 29 in Yaldabaoth. Yaldabaoth is known as the great octopus. And this number right here, 307, is the 63rd prime number, which is found from these guys' births. The four members of the band end up becoming the number 63 on just their days of birth. It's tied to the element copper, which is tied to Yaldabaoth, the Gnostic demiurge. And it's tied to this number right here called 307. And the 37 is once again shown tied to this card called the Jack Diamonds, the Jack in the Box. And I've shown this over and over in many different presentations now. I hope you've been following along, and this is no exception. These guys were all Jack in the Box. We're all Jack in the Box, folks. Not just these guys, but us as well. Now, when you take the elements of the periodic table and you bring it into their births, just the days. Bonham has gallium. He's born on the 31st. Robert Plant has calcium. He's born on the 20th. Jimmy Page has fluorine because he's born on the 9th. And John Paul Jones has lithium, which is tied to the number 3. So, of course, we're going to do the alchemy on these. Going over to the trusty calculator, you're going to get the number 134.903. 134.903. And when you add up 134 and 903, get out your calculators. If you add these two numbers up, this is the number you're going to get. 1037. There's that 37 again. Now, folks, if you want to get even more technical, when you bring in this number right here, most of you should know this, the 137 is the 33rd prime number. 33 is tied to our X and Y chromosomes. And we're going to be and it's tied to the swan song, and I'm going to be showing that coming up here later on in this presentation. But how about that, folks? You see the 37, there it is. There it is again through a different method, folks. Just using their birthdays tied to the 37, and then using the elements of it. So, folks, that's what I'm saying is, how could man ever code this themselves? When I could see using one person, but not when you're bringing in 4 different people. You know what that does with the odds of making this coded by man does? Completely eliminates it, because it would be 1 in a trillion gazillion for people to be able to code things like this with all these different birthdays and the cards and the elements of the periodic table and doing their alchemy. Folks, it's just not possible for man to code things like this. It's not possible. Man is being used. These 4 elements of related to their births, gallium, calcium, fluorine, and lithium, when you do the numerology of them, look at what number you get. Right back to that 103 again, tied to the word currency. Currency. And we found that through this right here. Through their alchemology, folks. Led Zeppelin. Through their alchemology, numerology and alchemy is 103. The whole band's all about gold currency, folks, and man is not doing this. Man is being used. These guys were brought together to play together, to create this super group, to create a massive amount of currency, because everything we do is tied to our currency. This is why these layers are showing up this way. Here are just their last names. I mean, I forgot about this slide, but it's funny, folks. You just gotta laugh. And this is the great part about discovering your personal code, because you gotta know what your position is on the world stage. Being used, because some people are like, what's the point if you're being used? Folks, because some of you are not living out your best experience because you're not seeing your code. Some of you are scared. Like, these guys were not living out their worst code. These guys were living out their true code. That's why they were successful in the world of music. One of the most successful bands, because they came together and they broke out. They went past their fear. If we have any free will at all, they used it because they became a superstar group. And look at what their last names equal, folks. Once again, how could man ever code this? 4 different people, 4 different households, 4 different set of parents, 4 different cities, 4 different hospitals being born in, 4 different days being born on. And some people think that man's coding this, that man is actually coding these people. I don't know where people's logic is, but here we go, folks. It's the number 84. Tied to this element right here called rubidium, because rubidium's most abundant weight is 84. 37. And of course, this is tied to the sun and moon card in the tarot, because it's 18 and 19, which equals the number 37. And that's the Ark of the Covenant. And there it is. Once again, it's the Jack Diamonds card. Tied to their last names, folks. So you have a layer here tied to the Jack Diamonds. Then you have another layer right here found from their births and their alchemy of their births. Then you have another layer right here found from adding up their days of their births. So Jack Diamonds. Folks, these are all different examples, but man's coding this. Some people actually think man is doing this consciously. I think you have to be absolutely crazy to think that. I don't know. What do you see? What do you think? Here are their names, their birth names on their birth certificates. John Paul Jones was John Richard Baldwin, James Patrick Page, there's John Bonham, and there's Robert Plant. Yeah, so John Paul Jones went by John Richard Baldwin. That was his birth name. Folks, look at what their birth names come out to in numerology altogether, folks? 241. Look at what prime number it is, folks. It's the 53rd prime number, which is tied to this element right here called iodine. It's the one half of the I am that I am. The word God equals 26 in numerology, and this is just a hierarchy of that 26. Look at this, the subtleties. Their names are 67 letters tied to this element, the Santa element. Ho, ho, ho. Holmium. Tied to our DNA, 64 possible codons in our DNA. This is the most magnetic element on the periodic table out of all 118 known elements. Think about that, folks. A supergroup comes together and their names are linked to the most magnetic element on the entire periodic table. How about that? We're talking about magnetism drawing people in. And these guys have it linked to their names in numerology, and they link to the I am. Now, when you go a step further, folks, here are their professional names that they went by on their albums. Jimmy Page, John Bonham, John Paul Jones, or a Plant. That equals the number 170. And folks, here's the other half of that puzzle. In the string of pi, the number 170 occupies the 95, 96, and 97 decimal digits. Starts at the 95th decimal digit of pi. Look at what it is, folks. The 95th element, Americium, is the AM, the AM, the abbreviation. So you have their full birth names on their birth certificates linked to the iodine, the I, and then you have their professional names linked to the AM. I am that I am. You see what I'm saying, folks? Folks, these guys were being used. It's as if whatever created this reality wants to come down here and experience what it feels like to be a rock star on the stage. It wants to be the best human being that can play out this kind of music. It wants to experience that. If you were the creator of this reality, would you want to come down here and experience what it feels like to be a human being? That's where the story of the fallen angels comes into play. That's exactly the story that we're told in theology. I just think that it's all tied together. There's no separate. We're all the fallen angels, folks. We're all tied to that little story. We're all little fallen angels. And our originations can be from multiple different layers. I know a lot. Listen, my Rolodex of healers that I'm involved with and people that read Akashic records and psychics and all that. A lot of these people, they think I'm from Pleiades, I'm from the Orion Belt, I'm from this, I'm from that. And who's to deny them what they believe? Maybe they came here to help change the world, to help break free from the chains that bind us. That is a possibility, folks. You have no idea. The people the stories they have, you know, well, you probably do have an idea, but close. Clearly, folks, these guys, I am that I am, the supergroup known as Led Zeppelin, not living out their lives by themselves. They have handlers, or at least they're being used, folks, to some degree and some level. So let's get into their most famous song, one of the most famous songs on the entire planet. I mean, everybody should know this song. It's called Stairway to Heaven. It's a long song, but folks, this is where I just think it's super funny. And I think that, you know, again, whatever created this reality, it's much more powerful than any one of us. But clearly you can see that Stairway to Heaven in its total numerology is a 57. 57, this is all over Back to the Future. It's subliminally in a lot of movies. It's tied to the 12 constellations of the zodiac because 5 + 7 = 12. And if you notice that the movie, which I decoded, if you haven't seen the decode on this, I'd highly suggest checking it out, folks. I broke down it all. I showed how all the people in the movies of The Truman Show were all being used. Every single one of them, from the producer to Jim Carrey, they're all being used to play out the parts. And notice that The Truman Show is a direct match of the song Stairway to Heaven. And that's why This is the humor of the divine or whatever created this reality. Here's the stairway that Jim Carrey ended up walking up to exit the world stage. It's just really hilarious. And then, look at what he's portraying himself. That's the crucifixion right there, folks. You got to, you look at all these layers, and it's not easy. I'm sorry, it's very, what was the word I'm looking for? It's very easy to see that things are undeniable when you look at all the subtleties and you really pay attention. But clearly, that's what he's making right there, the crucifixion. Done on purpose, done consciously, I don't know. I wasn't there directing the movie. Not sure. Now, you could definitely say, yeah, well, they did that on purpose. Well, yeah, I could see how consciously that, but then I go retro and go right back. See, man's being used. So everything you think they're doing consciously, they're doing unconsciously. They're just being controlled through their mind. And I'm going to get into that. But here is Stairway to Heaven through the cards. Through the cards of illumination. Stairway is a 19. That's the 19th card, called the Six Clubs, which is really interesting because you can see it has 33 right on the card. All the sixes are 33. There's 3 and 3, 33, making up the 6. Stairway. 33 vertebrae. We go up the Jacob's ladder. That's what the Jacob's ladder is, folks. It's our vertebrae. Stairway, vertebrae, ascension. Stairway is 19. The word 2, which is the bridge word, is the number 11. It's a 47. It's really interesting. This word right here is a bridge word, and it's 47. And then heaven is, it's the lovely number 27, which is gold currency, gold current. And that's the Ace Diamonds card. So you have the 19th card linked to Stairway. You have the Jack Hearts, the 11th card linked to the word 2. And then you have the word heaven linked to the Ace Diamonds, the 27th card in the deck. So 6 clubs, Jack Hearts, Ace Diamonds, makeup of that 57, tied to the Truman Show, the exit on the stage, the stairway to the exit. And when you say those cards through numerology, 6 clubs, Jack Hearts, Ace Diamonds, it's a number 91, which is tied to this word right here, which I've been showing over and over, which is a massive word, a massive noun, is the word battery. Battery is 91 in the English, and its counterpart, it's the 19 in the Chaldean, because these both use the number 8, 26 and 8, but that's why I feel these are the two biggest numerology ciphers. They're tied together. They have the most dominance in the world of numerology. That's my opinion, but I've shown over and over that they're directly tied to the cards and the elements, and none of the other ciphers are directly linked like these two, which is why I favor and use these, because I feel like they tell the best story as how our reality works. But there it is. The Stairway to Heaven is a battery, folks. And if you haven't seen my Christ battery decode, I'd highly suggest checking that out. Because it's possible, it's very possible that we are all stuck in a time loop. And the heaven's currency. When you believe, like, I'm going to go to heaven when I die, that's currency. That's having hope and faith in the gold currency. Is it really real? Is there really a heaven? No one's ever been there to come back and prove that they've been there. So it's an idea. It's possible. There's got to be something beyond this physical reality. But is it heaven? Is that really what that is? Or is it just a trap? The whole heaven and hell. Ronnie James Dio said it in Black Sabbath. It goes on and on. It's heaven and hell. And that's infinity, folks. Not eternity. Infinity. Two different things. So it's a battery. And the battery needs to get charged by our emotions, by our currency. Currency and heaven both equal the number 27. So when you take these cards tied from Stairway to Heaven, and then you bring in the elements of the periodic table off the most famous song known to man. I think it's one of the most famous songs. One of them, if not the most famous song. It's potassium, the 19, tied to Stairway. It's sodium, tied to the word 2, T-O, number 11. And then remember, heaven is 27 tied to cobalt. There's that chaos and order again. And when you add up and do the alchemy of these three elements using the trusty calculator, you're going to get the number 120.887, which is tied to this element right here called antimony, which is tied to the number 28, which is tied to our 33 vertebrae. This is the all-seeing eye element. Now I'm going to show you that right here. Here is antimony. When you go to and again, these are clues. These are bridges. These are clues for us to really observe from, and it tells more of the story. But there's the icon the Royal Society of Chemistry decided to use to represent this element. And the very reason why they did that, folks, is when you go down to the uses and properties, it's right here. The symbol is the Eye of Horus, an ancient Egyptian symbol of protection. The ancient Egyptians used antimony sulfide for their mascara under their eyes to darken their eyes. When you cut open a brain, you're going to locate the all-seeing eye inside the brain. I'm going to let me show you that. And some of you know this, but I'm going to show, for those of you that don't, this is really interesting. When you cut open the brain, there it is. It's the all-seeing eye inside the brain, folks. Make no mistake about it. That's what the ancient Egyptians were trying to tell us. It's right there. And I feel this is what controls us. It runs our reality. And that's why the head, the mind, the little voice in your head, that owns you. You don't own that. And there it is. Stairway to Heaven, owned by the Eye of Horus, which is on the back of a dollar bill. If you look at in the background, I kind of made this graphic. There's the stairway off of somebody else that created a graphic, and it just fits perfectly right inside that pyramid. See it? Right inside that pyramid, fits right there. And then, of course, at the very top of that stairway to heaven is the all-seeing eye, the Eye of Providence, tied to the number 46, tied to the architect of the great architect of the universe that the Masons call God, the God. It's on the back of the dollar bill, which everybody seems to think this is a very demonic or satanic symbol. And I used to be one of those people. I thought it was satanic, and back in the day when I was kind of asleep and I didn't realize what it meant. Now I know what it means. But Stairway to Heaven's tied to this dollar bill, found from the antimony element, and there it is. It's right at the top, folks. The temple, Solomon's temple, if you do the dimensions of Solomon's temple, it was 60 cubits by 20 cubits, by 30 cubits, but 60 cubits by 20 cubits. If you take 60 times 20, you're going to link to this 120. You're going to have more zeros there, but nonetheless, it's still going to be linked to this number 120, the all-seeing eye, 51. Which is tied to the throat chakra and the root chakra, Mercury and Saturn. And it's tied to gold, folks. That's why I keep saying it's gold currency. This is why I have the goldfish here. Here are the three elements tied to Stairway to Heaven. Stay with me now, folks. And remember that when you add up the elements that are tied to Stairway to Heaven and their cards, it equals the number 120. There it is again, right there. Whoops. There are the three cards tied to the 120 and their three elements they're tied to. So then we want to add up 120 plus 887. Going over to the left side of the screen, 120 plus 887 is a total of 1007, and there is the word gold as the number 17. You just got to drop the zeros, and this is how the numbers express themselves. So clearly you can see, folks, we're just goldfish. We're fish. The word fish equals the number 17. Right here. Keep your eye on this Chaldean right there. There it is. Fish is 17. Gold is 17. And then, of course, the one that I feel runs the box, the Yod-Heh-Vah-Heh, or at least hijacked it, I don't know, is the 17. How about that? It's the 17 tied to that 63. Remember, Led Zeppelin tied to the number 63. But it's all linked together, folks, and it's all telling us the story and the narration of the story and our origins and history and why we're here, because we're being mined for our gold. If you study the Anunnaki, and Planet X and Zechariah Sitchin and all his work. I mean, that's all the same thing. Anunnaki equals 26. God equals 26. It's all tied to the same thing, folks. It's all that whole gold story and the whole stairway to heaven. We're being mined for our gold. And these stories, when you start to believe in them, folks, and you put your faith in those, you give your energy away. I don't know if that's the correct way to go. I can't tell you which way to go. You need to use your own logic and discernment. But then we get into, that part of the song that glitters is gold. Glitters is gold. And there it is. There's a lady who's sure all that glitters is gold. And she's buying a stairway to heaven. One of the last pieces of the verse, or one of the best pieces of the verse, a big standout. Notice it's 70 letters. 70 is tied to the number 96 through the string of pi. That's why I have the yin yang right there. And this total piece of the lyrics, which is a big one in my opinion, this is telling you what's going on. Even this word all, if you decode this word all glitters is gold. All is the 133. You see the 33 in there? It's just got the pyramid in there. The A is the pyramid, but there it is, the 33. All glitters is gold. All that glitters. So it's saying everything, the all is the 133 tied to our vertebrae, the 33 steps going up our spinal cords, ascension, tied to our DNA, our X and Y chromosomes. And this was the big standout. You see, in numerology, it becomes the number 240. When you go into the string of pi, that number 240, it appears at the 1,196th decimal digit of pi. And there is that 196. You see it? The 196 is right there, and there it is. She's buying a stairway to heaven, 240, tied to this in the string of pi. She's buying a stairway to heaven. What's heaven? Gold. It's gold currency, turning lead into gold. That's alchemy, folks. Turning Led Zeppelin, turning lead into gold. Stairway to heaven. Do you see how the code is expressing itself? That's why man could never do this. You'd have to involve numerology and lyrics, have the lyrics come out this way, taking sections of the lyrics, tying it into pi, which has always been here, then bringing it into the elements of the periodic table. We're talking about heaven, and we're talking about all that glitters is gold. There it is, folks. How could mankind ever code this? It wouldn't be possible, folks. It's challenging enough just to write a freaking song and the lyrics to it and the melodies, and then producing it. Then to really pull pieces out and have it linked to all. Folks, man's not doing this. It's part of the code, part of the software called the game of life. So when you bring Led Zeppelin, again, lead into gold, Led Zeppelin, Stairway to Heaven. Led Zeppelin is a 54. And it's tied to this element right here. Besides the alchemology and being tied to the 103 and cobalt and currency, it's tied to the number 54. That's tied to this element called xenon. Now, xenon, folks, if you've been following along, is the 54th element, and it's the lightning bolt, and it's derived from the Greek word xenos, and it means stranger. It means stranger. And of course, it's the XE, xenon. It starts with the letter X. The letter X is the 24th letter in the English alphabet. Now follow along with me here, folks. We started from Led Zeppelin being 54, tied to xenon. Xenon's first letter, called the capstone of numerology, is the letter X. The letter X in the English alphabet is the 24th letter out of the 26 letters. 24. And then we come right back down to this song and she's buying a stairway to heaven is 240. There's that 24. You see how all this is connected, folks? And there's no way ever that man could code at this level. There wouldn't be enough time in the day. There's no possible way man is being used. That is the only logical conclusion with anybody with a brain could come out to, is that man is being used to express this code. I can see coding numerology, but not bringing numerology into the elements of the periodic table, bringing the tarot into it, bringing the cards of illumination, the numbers of the letters of the alphabet. And folks, it's not possible. These people were being used to sing their songs, to serenade you. That's what they're being used for. There's the X. The 54, which is tied to Led Zeppelin, is this card in the tarot called the Five of Swords. This card right here, notice the symbology. Let me zoom in, folks. And this is really important, so stick with me. This Five of Swords, the 54th card tied to Led Zeppelin, in the background, there are guys here that have thrown their swords down. And this guy's kind of like smirking, and he's got 3 swords. They've like, I don't want to play anymore. That's what this card means symbolically. It's like, man, screw you. I don't want to play anymore. You don't play fair. Now, I want you to think about that. The symbolism of this card is you have one guy who is collecting the swords, and you get this big smirk. He's like, haha, I won. And then these guys they got their backs turned, and they're like, man, forget you, dude. I don't want to play your game anymore. I don't want to play anymore. I don't want to play anymore, folks. 54, Xenon, stranger, running the game. I feel that this has an integral part of the story of what's running the game. And if you go and study the movie They Live, John Carpenter's, that came out in 1988 of all years, there's the 88. The news station that was broadcasting the hypnotic trance to keep you in a trance was the news station number 54. Just remember that, folks. 54. And it was all about keeping you under a hypnotic trance. And you know what's fascinating about this? I don't want to play anymore. I feel like this is perhaps one of the front runners of the one controlling the game, called life. And it runs all music, religion, sports, politics, everything to keep you busy enough so you don't pay attention to the esoteric behind the scenes that are important of what's running this reality. This card's the Five of Swords. In the cards of illumination, the counterpart, the card that came first, these spades mean swords, by the way. This is the Five of Spades. It's card 45. And why I'm showing this, folks, is do you see the X right there? There's the X in the background that you may have not been paying attention to, which is our X chromosomes, which is tied to the number 24, which is tied to the total numerology of this statement in the lyrics. She's buying a stairway to heaven. All that glitters is gold. Because folks, we are being used for our energetic gold. And when you figure out that's exactly how the game works, you don't want to play anymore. A lot of you know that. A lot of you are tired. You're done. You don't want to play anymore. You're like, man, just forget this game. It's all bullshit. All this suffering and it's all this chaos and order down here in duality. You're like, man, I'm done with it. I'm through with it. This is what this story's telling us. And that's why I'm saying the voice in your head, you don't own the voice in your head. Not when you're asleep, you don't. But I believe that perhaps when you come into terms with this, when you realize that there's some kind of game master, puppet master, that's trying to take your energy, and you realize, hey, I'm not giving you my energy anymore. I'm not going to pay attention to some guy up on the pedestal preaching from a book that I have no idea where it came from. Like, it obviously has good and bad inside of it, but is that story a reality? You know, when you come to terms and you realize that maybe this is what Pink Floyd sang, folks, in their song the song title is called Brain Damage. It's called brain damage. There's someone in my head, but it's not me. Xenon. Stranger. Tied to Led Zeppelin, folks. These guys were being used to write their music. Now you can go ahead and say, oh, well, Jimmy Page, he was in the occult and he was practicing black magic and he was enrolled with Crowley. And folks, forget all that stuff. Were all the band members demonic? Come on, folks, use your common sense and logic. So again, Stairway to Heaven, here it is, folks. Jimmy Page, Robert Plant in the background. Kind of a fun graphic to make here, but look at the song length, folks. The length of the song. Now again, folks, you gotta use your common sense and logic. 8 minutes and 2 seconds. You realize what would have to go into creating a song with the lyrics and all the music that goes behind it to get it exactly at 8 minutes and 2 seconds to have it match up with this element right here called lead. What's the name of the band, folks? Led Zeppelin. Notice that the element lead, 80-second element tied to the length of the song, has an atomic weight of 207. Just drop that zero and you go right back to that word called current or currency. They both equal the number 27. Tied to chaos and order, which runs our duality. So folks, you got to use your common sense here. Clearly you can see these guys didn't write the song Stairway to Heaven and say, we got to make it 8 minutes and 2 seconds because it's tied to lead and we're called Led Zeppelin and it's the 80-second element. Folks, these guys were not at that level of consciousness. Neither were their producers. I can assure, because I can show you so many of my videos. Go look at the timestamps. If you think that I'm being used, or if you think I'm consciously like sitting down and I'm choosing how long these videos are, and I'm doing that all by myself and consciously like, oh, I got to end this video. Like right now I'm at 1 hour on this video and I'm like, okay, well, I have to make sure it's 1 hour and 19 minutes long to equal 119, right? Folks, you realize what I would have to do to get because I'm freelancing everything. I'm improvising. I am not going on a structured template of my videos. Some of you, I thank you so much. One guy said, hey, you repeat things over and over. You know why I repeat things over and over? Because repetition's the key to success. I learned that through being an entrepreneur and studying a lot of personal development. If you tell somebody something one time, the likelihood of them forgetting it is very high. But if you tell something over and over and beat it into their head, they will not forget that. That's why I do all the repetition. That's why I say things over and over and I sound like a broken record. Because I want to make sure you, ladies and gentlemen, you get this information and you get it memorized and you realize what's really going on behind the scenes. It's not what you think it is, what we've been taught, what we weren't taught. More importantly, what we were not taught. This information is the things that we were not taught. But to me, it's the most valuable pieces of information. So here's another look, Stairway to Heaven. Another piece of the song, as we wind on down the road, our shadows taller than our soul. And it was all about a lady. There's a lady who's sure all that glitters is gold. And here it is. It's the lady again. The lady. See how everything still turns to gold. Turning lead. That's why they're Led Zeppelin. Lead. Lead to gold. Lead to gold. And it's all about this lady. Who's the lady? I want you to notice that this song, the album actually, Led Zeppelin 4, Stairway to Heaven, came out on the 8th of November. The 8th of November is the Queen Clubs card. Here it is. Here it is. The 8th of November is the Queen of Clubs. It just so happens to be the 25th card in the deck. And what's so funny, and I just caught this, and see, this is how I miss things, but the 25th card in the deck, let me show you that, folks, just so you know, and I'm being very transparent. There it is, the Queen Clubs is the 25th card. And I just saw this. So, what is 25? It's manganese. And what's manganese? Weight 54. 54. Which goes right back to the xenon and there's someone in my head, but it's not me, going back to the 54 Led Zeppelin. You see what I mean, folks? There's no way man could ever code this. Not at this level, because there's too many moving parts. You would never get anything done in life if you consciously had to sit down with all these layers and try to piece them together to have them out, like have them have the outcomes that they're coming out to. I mean, I'm just picking pieces out of the song. You would have to pick you'd have to go word by word. You'd have to do this is called gematria, actually. Gematria is the coding of words into numbers. This is called numerology. Gematria is when you code. We're decoding. That's the difference. But you'd have to do the gematria on every song, and there's no way these artists are doing it consciously. Not possible. Not possible. So there it is. This song comes out on November 8th, tied to the Queen Clubs, which I feel is the lady inside that song, that all glitters is gold. And it's the 25th card, which again is tied to that number 54, which is tied to that element xenon, which is the stranger in your head. It's the lady in your head, the stranger that talks to you. That little voice that never shuts up, the one that's talking right now, that's the one that you're not in control of. Maybe when you break free and you realize that you're in a prison, a mental prison, and you finally realize like, hey, I'm not going to be in that prison anymore. That's the only possibility that I can see of how to break free out of this game of life. It came out in 1971, this song, 1971, and 71 is the 20th prime number. 71 is the 20th prime number. And that's, tied to duality. 20 is duality. Oh, no, I did include it here. But there it is. I didn't think I did. But there's the other look of when this song came out. The album Led Zeppelin Floyd came out. Probably the most famous song in rock and roll history, Stairway to Heaven. Think about that, folks. The most famous song in rock and roll history, one of them anyway, comes out on November 8th, which is 8/11 or 11/8. Some of you know how big that number 8/11 is, or 11/8, tied to a lot of big names on the world stage. Aaron, you should know it's tied to Tom Brady of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who's going to be playing in the Super Bowl on the 7th of February, which is 27. That's currency. But anyway, again, 25. Queen Clubs, November 8th. Tied to manganese, which is this word originates from the word magnet, magnetism, magnetism, and xenon is in cahoots with this element right here. So there it is, folks. The number 8/11. When this song came out, this is how they wrote it. Released 8 November, in some parts of the world, the day comes before the month. Here in the United States, it would be 11/8, but it can be done in both fashions. And the 8/11 is the 141st prime number. Folks, what's pi? 3.141. And if you remember what the puppet master was, it was tied to Led Zeppelin itself. It was tied to their alchemology. It was tied to currency at the very beginning of this presentation. So here's another look. Here's 1971, the year this came out. Now I know this is maybe a little bit more abstract because a lot of things came out in 1971, but we're not just talking about anything, folks. We're talking about one of the most influential songs that has ever come out on the world stage in rock and roll itself. So this has massive significance in 1971. Notice that 19 is the 8th prime number, 71 is the 20th prime number. What's 8 and 20? That's 28. What's 28 tied to? It's tied to 33. It's tied to our vertebrae, tied to the X and Y chromosomes. It's tied to Lucifer. 28 is Lucifer. So when I go to numerology, you type in Lucifer, there it is. It's the 28. This is the 8th prime. This is the 20th prime, 1971, 28. And why I'm showing that is you see number 71 is tied to this element right here called lutetium. And if you study Manly P. Hall, the great Freemason, he'll tell you that the number of Lucifer is 741. Let me zoom in and show you. But there is that 741. It's just not in the same order, but it's a number anagram right there. It's the 174. And it's really fascinating with the story because, see, Lucifer is the character who supposedly is the fallen angel, the leader of the fallen angel coming down to earth into duality, leaving his spiritual body behind. And this is the number of duality, because if you keep your eyes on this Chaldean, there it is right here. It's duality. It's 20. Duality is 20. And it's the same as this word right here, going down in the hole into duality. And that's why this story is really interesting. The fallen angel called Lucifer, there is the Lucifer, Lucy. 1971, Stairway to Heaven comes out. It's all about a lady, is the lady Lucy. And this 71 is the 20th prime number, tied to duality and the whole, tied to calcium. Folks, what are our bones made up of? Calcium. It's our physicality. So is this story right here of when this, and remember what we're talking about. We're talking about Stairway to Heaven, going back up. Well, where do we come from? If this is really true, if there is such a thing as heaven, and that's where we came from, something outside of our physical reality, well, we had to shed or at least leave our spiritual body, and we have to slow ourselves down and become physical matter into calcium, our bones. It's just really fascinating how one of Lucifer's elements, lutetium, is directly tied to calcium, which is tied to our bones. And 71 and 20 is 91, which is battery, tied to that Stairway to Heaven again. So folks, then you get into the record length. The Stairway to Heaven came off of this great album, Led Zeppelin 4. I mean, it was this is not a bad song on the album. Every song is amazing. And, it's the length of this record is 42 minutes and 34 seconds. And when you add up 42 and 34, get out your calculators, you're going to get the number 76. 76. It's osmium. It's the Wizard of Oz. Who was running this album? What was the stranger that was running this album, folks? They see Plant and John Paul Jones and Bonham and Jimmy Page. Folks, they were being used by the Wizard of Oz. That's why the album length was this long. The producer's not doing this, folks. There's no way. There'd be too many things in the way to have this thing. This is just one example. I've shown countless on albums. It's the Wizard of Oz that is behind this album, whatever the Wizard of Oz is. And that's why the yellow brick road is gold. That's why this story is all about gold and getting to the Emerald City. Emerald is green. Yellow, green. The chakras. This is yellow is 3, green is 4, 34. Emerald City, Wizard of Oz. And notice the atomic weight of osmium, it's 191. There's the 19 and the 91. That's the battery right there, folks. 76. 76 is tied to Nephilim as well. So there's the breakdown of Led Zeppelin 4 and the record length. Again, it was osmium, but when you do the elements of the periodic table, let me zoom in. It's molybdenum once again, and the 34th element, which is the moon, selenium. And there's that master number 77, tied to iridium, which is tied to the Wizard of Oz, because the numbers encroach. The 76 becomes the 77. There's the mirror of the gold. But what's really fascinating, again, is this element. Total record length, 42. This is the big standout. It's 42 because 34 seconds is kind of the runner-up. This is the dominant number, 42. And what does molybdenum mean? It means lead. Led Zeppelin. In the primes, when you do the numerology of molybdenum and selenium, there's that number 76. And what was that 76 tied to? The Wizard of Oz. Tied to the full length of the album. 42 plus 34 is 76. So folks, you can see, when you bring in multiple, that's why most of the decoders out there, you're using like 4 ciphers at one time, which not only makes it easy to connect words, but it actually increases the odds of man ever controlling any of it. Because whenever you get multiple ciphers that connect into these numbers, it reduces the chances of man ever being able to code this, because then you have to add another layer onto it and another layer. It just decreases the odds of being able to ever think man could ever sit there and link all these things together. So let's get into their number 1 album, the first album of Led Zeppelin. Now that we showed number 4, here's one of the songs off of the number 1 album is Good Times, Bad Times. Good times, bad times equals the number 62. 62 is the mirror of the number 26. The word God equals 26. Folks, this 62, I could go way deep on this, but let's just show you the basic fundamentals through the string of pi. It should tell you everything you need to know, folks. This is how beautiful this story is orchestrated through this software called the Game of Life. 62. Now remember what it's talking about. Good times and bad times. What is good and bad? That's duality. So the string of pi tells us exactly how this story is ringing true. 62 is the total numerology. When you place that into the string of pi, look at what number that it's linked to. It's the number 20. What's 20 again? Duality. What's duality? Yin yang. What is the yin yang? It's good and bad. So folks, you can clearly see this is just a song, but man could never code this. Never could. There's no way they could code it like this, folks. These guys named this song. Do you think they sat down and said, well, it's got to be linked to the number 62 because 62 is linked to the number 20 and that's linked to duality, and this song's going to be about duality? Folks, there's no way that's even logically possible. I don't care how esoteric or how much of a magician you think you are. You would never get anything done to try to code your life to make sure that these outcomes are coming out this way, to try to mock people and fool them, try to pull the woolly over their eyes. These guys had no interest in mocking you, folks. There's no rituals going on. They're just musicians playing songs and music. Here's when the song came out, March 10th. And I don't even know why I have the number 103 here. I think it's because... Why did I have the number 103? Oh, I know why now. Excuse me, folks. Well, there it is. It's March 10th. 10 and March. If you take 1, 0, and March is the 3rd month, it's going to give you 103. March 10th, otherwise known as 103. There it is again. 27th prime number. Well, I mean, folks, consciously choosing dates of when I'm releasing these songs, perhaps. But then I keep going right back and saying, man's not in control of the little voice in your head. It's dictating everything you do. So again, it has no bearing. Man is not doing anything. They're being used. Look at this, folks, right here, March 10th. Look at what day of the year it is. 69th day of the year. What's 69? It's yin yang. Go right back. And this is off of what is this song called? Good times, bad times. What does that link to? This word right there, through the string of pi. 62, off of the numerology of the song, is found at the 20th decimal digit, which is linked to duality. And we're talking about good and bad, 69. This song comes out on March 10th. It's the 69th day of the year. And you think man's coding this consciously? I don't know where people's brains are at these days, honestly. I think they're too busy in trying to connect the numbers and thinking they've got it all figured out. That's just what I think. That's why I got haters out there, because I'm calling on their bullshit. I'm calling them on their BS. This album, Led Zeppelin, the first one, came out in 1969. That's yin yang. The album itself was released on January 12th. January 12th is when this album came out by Led Zeppelin, their first album ever, 1969, January 12th. January 12th is the 2 spades card. Let me go to that right here. Here it is, January, and then the 12th, it's the 2 spades card. It's the 41st card in the deck, by the way. Let me show you that. There it is, 2 spades, right there, card number 41. When you go into the string of pi, there it is, folks. It comes out in 1969. 69 appears at the 41st decimal digit of pi. 41 is what? The 2 spades card. The 2 spades card is tied to the release date of this album on January 12th. There's the release year. There's the release date tied to the release date card. Both of them tied into the string of pi. Man's being used, folks, because this code is so tightly woven. This is the reason why this band was so great on the world stage. They were supposed to be. It was their destiny. Predestination, folks. That's what you're dealing with. Your life was scripted before you ever got here. So deal with that. Realize your code. That's why getting a reading from myself or from somebody that you resonate with, my friend Santos, he does great readings with astrology. You know, I have a friend that reads Akashic records. I got a Rolodex of people. I got psychics. I got people that does card readings. I do everything. Folks, you got to know your code. The more you know your code, the more doors you're going to open, the better experience you're going to have on the world stage. That's the way it works. That's why you want to know your code. Look at the length of this album, folks. 44 minutes and 56 seconds. There's that 56. If you know what the fit, that's tied to the number 74 through the string of pi. But 44 is gold currency. Gold currency. This is the studio. I think this is my last topic. This is the studio where they recorded their album and you know, many of the other artists recorded their albums at this location in London. I think it was in London. It's called Olympic Studios. Now, folks, again, this building was not built to be a studio to record records in. If you go research, this is why, I'm going to show you this. This is why, excuse me, there's no way that man could ever code when I'm showing. This is right here, Olympic Studios. When you go and research this, the origins of it, okay? It was never a studio in the first place. Okay, it was never a studio in the first place right here. It was constructed, and I'm going to get into this, and it was a theater. It was a theater, folks. But of course, since the whole game of life is scripted, whatever created the reality and make this theater into a studio. And it knew it was like music's going to get recorded here. Gold currency is going to get recorded here. If you're the creator of this reality, that's exactly why you built this building in 1906. And we're going to get into that. But here's the full address. The full address of this location, of where Led Zeppelin recorded some of their albums and a lot of other big names. It not only has 26 letters, 26 is iron, tied to the word God, but it's a 126, which is tied to this element right here called iodine, one half of the I am. Remember that when I showed it to you? Led Zeppelin, all their names on their birth certificates ends up becoming 241, which is tied to this element right here. So here's the history of it that I just showed you. The standout is when it was first constructed, known as the Barnes Building, 1906. The standout, 196, right here, folks. There it is. So the album that Zeppelin recorded, one of the greatest albums of all time, the songs, all these things, folks, this studio, It's gold. It's gold. Tied to the originating date of the construction of this building. But man's doing this, folks. Man sat down and said, we're going to create a theater and we're going to build it in 1906. This is the year because it's tied to gold, baby. And I know Led Zeppelin's going to come here and they're going to record some of their music. They're going to record some of their music 60 years, 70 years past the point of when we're going to construct this. I know that's going to happen. I can look into the future, and I know there's going to be a band amongst other bands that are going to come here, and this is going to turn in from a theater, it's going to turn into a recording studio. Folks, do you see how insane that story sounds? But yet some of you that decode, that's exactly what you think happens, because if you think man's coding all this, then how do you explain this right here? Here's what it's called, Olympic Sound Studios. Look at what it is. I told you we'd talk about, remember the Greek mythology? It's the Olympians versus the Titans. Olympic Sound Studios. Olympic. Tied to currency. It's a total of the number 80. What was done? What do you do in the sound studio? What do you do when you record a record? You sing. What's the planet of communication? It's Mercury. It's Mercury, and that's tied to the number 80 right there. It's right there. And of course, let's not leave out the biggest planet in the solar system. It's called Jupiter. Tied to currency. Tied to Olympus. See how Olympic, the Olympian. What is Jupiter? What was Zeus? He was the Olympian. Olympians. Greek mythology. Zeus. Known as, in the Roman, Jupiter. See how all that's connected, folks? And you think man's doing this? I wonder about some people. Also, here's my last category, folks. It's the Swan Song. I only have a couple slides. I'm almost done. Thank you for sticking with me. But this is the record label that Led Zeppelin launched in 1974. 1974. 74 is tied to this element right here called arsenic. Arsenic has 33 protons. The record company is called Swan Song. 33. Which is why I have the crucifixion in the background, because, you know, Jesus equals 74, Lucifer equals 74. There's the angel with the wings flying up to heaven. And the Swan Song. And I got a decode coming out on the Swan, and man, it's going to blow some of you absolutely away when I show you the tie-ins of the Swan, because man, it gets deep. But there it is, Swan Song 33, Ascension. So I got the crucifixion in the background. Again, they launched this album on the 10th of May in 1974, and the May 10th card is the 9 diamonds. And the 9 diamonds is the 35th card in the deck. And the 35 is the element bromine. And what's bromine's atomic weight? Let me zoom in. 79. What's 79, folks? It's gold. It's gold once again. So you see that you just got to go through a couple more layers, but clearly these guys they're not controlling this. Do you think they knew that the 9 diamonds is the 35th card, and they knew that bromine was attached to the 9 diamonds, and they knew that the number 79 is linked to gold? Do you think that Page and Plant and company of Led Zeppelin knew that when they decided to launch this record label called Swan Song that was linked to and they had to name it 33 to link to the 74 coming out in 1974? Folks, there's no way possible at the level that I'm showing you, because we're decoding what was constructed by man just filling their orders out by way of acting out their life through their script. That's it. That's the way it works, folks. So what's your code? What's your blueprint? That's what you need to find out. Some of you don't know why you're here, and you should know. Decode yourself. I came out with a free video. It's an hour and 5 minutes long, how to decode yourself. It's got over 11,000 views. Thank you for all the people that have watched it and give me a thumbs up. You know, it's free information. 10 layers on how to decode yourself. Know your code. These guys knew their code. They didn't even, Jimmy Page was a big person in the occult. He probably studied himself. But I don't know about the other guys. I don't know. But birds of a feather flock together. So maybe. But what is it you saw? What did you see during this presentation, folks? You know, there's the big eyeball. Folks, you know what this is right here? If any of you have ever gotten your natal charts done, that's what this is right here. This is your astrological chart called the snapshot of your eye. And here is Ophiuchus. You got the 12 zodiac signs around the eye, and then in the middle is the 13th zodiac sign called Ophiuchus. And this is your pupil. Because what is the definition of a pupil? Student. We're students of life. These are your black suns. They absorb the light. That's why we're not light people, we're black. We absorb the light. We take the light in. But our bodies on the inside, they're completely black. But this is your astrological chart. And so what is it you saw? What did you see during this presentation? I know I missed a lot of stuff. I could have added a lot more things, but what is it that you saw during this presentation? I'd love to hear the information that you saw that I missed, or something you can add on, folks. So anyway, folks, that's all I got for today. Thanks for sticking with me. I really appreciate it. That's all I got for today. My name is Logan. This is Decode Your Reality, and I thank you so very much for watching.